It was a quiet, suburban street, Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York, a place where families lived out their American dreams. The DeFeo family was one of those families. They lived in a large, beautiful Dutch colonial house at number 112. There was Ronald DeFeo Jr., his wife Louise, and their 5 children: Dawn, Allison, Mark, John Matthew, and the eldest, Ronald Jr., known as Butch. To outsiders, they seemed to have it all. But inside those walls, things were not as they appeared. The father, Ronald Sr., was known to be a strict and often angry man. The family life was filled with tension. It was a pressure cooker, waiting for a release. Then came that day, November 13, 1974. A day that would forever stain the town's name. Ronald Butch DeFeo Jr., who was 23 years old at the time, burst into a local bar. He was frantic, screaming for help. He told the people there that someone had shot his parents. A small group of men went with him back to the house. They walked inside, not knowing what they would find. What they discovered was a scene of unimaginable horror. It was a scene that would become the start of a story known around the world. The kind of story that keeps you up at night. Upstairs, in their beds, they found the entire DeFeo family. 6 people, all dead. Ronald Sr. and Louise had each been shot twice. The 4 younger children, Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John Matthew, had each been shot once. All of them were found lying face down in their beds, as if they were still asleep. There were no signs of a struggle. No one in the neighborhood had heard any gunshots, which was strange because the rifle used was very loud. The police arrived at a scene of quiet, orderly death. It was chilling, and the only family member left alive was Butch himself. The initial shock quickly turned to suspicion. The police questioned the young man who had found the bodies. At first, Butch DeFeo Jr. had a story. He said he had been at work and came home to find his family murdered. He even suggested a possible suspect, a mob hitman who he claimed had a grudge against his father. But his story had holes. It didn't add up. The timeline he gave police was shaky, and as they pressed him, his calm demeanor began to crack. The focus of the investigation was narrowing, and it was pointing directly at one person, the sole survivor, Butch. The next day, after hours of questioning, Ronald DeFeo Jr. confessed. He told the police that he had done it. He said he had killed his entire family, one by one. But why? That was the question on everyone's mind. What could possibly drive a son and brother to commit such a terrible act? His confession was just the beginning of a long and twisted journey into his mind. It was a journey filled with changing stories and dark claims. DeFeo's motive was like a ghost. You could feel it was there, but you could never quite see it clearly. It seemed to shift and change with every telling. Over the years, DeFeo's story would change many times. It was a tangled web of contradictions. In one version, he claimed his sister Dawn was involved. He said they had planned the murders together, but then he killed her too. In another story, he said his mother was the mastermind. He even claimed at one point that Dawn had killed the family and he had only killed her in a fit of rage afterward. These different versions made it impossible to know the real truth. Was he a cold-blooded killer trying to confuse everyone? Or was something else at play? Something inside his own head? One of the most famous parts of his story was the claim that he heard voices. He told investigators that voices in the house told him to kill his family. He said these dark forces pushed him to do it, that he was not in control of his own actions. This claim became a central part of his defense. His lawyer, William Weber, argued that DeFeo was insane. He painted a picture of a young man tormented by his abusive father and haunted by commands he could not ignore. The defense wanted the jury to see a man who was not evil, but sick. But the prosecution saw things very differently. They presented a much simpler and perhaps more believable motive. They argued that Ronald DeFeo Jr. was not insane at all. He was just greedy and angry. He wanted to get his hands on his father's life insurance money, which was a very large sum. They pointed to his history of drug use and his arguments with his father over money. The prosecution's story was not about ghosts or voices. It was a classic tale of a troubled son who saw murder as a solution to his problems. The jury would have to decide, was he mad or was he just bad? The trial of Ronald DeFeo Jr. began in October 1975. The world was watching. The main question was his sanity. The defense brought in a psychiatrist who testified that DeFeo had a personality disorder and was acting out of a delusional reality on the night of the murders. He argued that Butch did not know what he was doing was wrong because of his mental state. The jury had to listen to complex psychological testimony. They had to weigh the evidence and decide the fate of the young man at the center of this horrific crime. It was a heavy burden for any jury to carry. The prosecution, however, came back with its own expert. Their psychiatrist testified that while DeFeo had a personality disorder and used drugs, he was not legally insane. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he knew it was wrong. The prosecutor, Gerard Sullivan, argued that the murders were a calculated act. DeFeo had waited until everyone was asleep. He had moved from room to room, methodically killing his family. It wasn't the work of a man lost in a delusion. It was the work of a cold, deliberate killer. After deliberating, the jury agreed with the prosecution. On November 21, 1975, Ronald DeFeo Jr. was found guilty of 6 counts of second-degree murder. He was sentenced to 6 concurrent sentences of 25 years to life in prison. For the justice system, the case was closed. But for the house on Ocean Avenue, a new chapter was about to begin. A chapter that would turn this tragic true crime story into one of the most famous ghost stories of all time. The story of the DeFeo family's murder was about to be overshadowed by something else entirely. Something that would capture the public's imagination for decades to come. Just over a year after the murders, a new family moved into the house. George and Kathy Lutz, along with their 3 children. They bought the house for a very low price, knowing its dark history. But they only lasted 28 days. They fled the house in terror, claiming it was haunted. They described strange smells, cold spots, green slime oozing from the walls, and a swarm of flies in the middle of winter. Their most terrifying claim was that they felt a demonic presence in the home. Their story became the basis for the 1977 best-selling book, The Amityville Horror, which was then turned into a blockbuster movie in 1979. The story told by the Lutz family turned the Amityville house into a pop culture phenomenon. Suddenly, the focus was no longer on the 6 real people who had lost their lives there. Instead, the world was fascinated by the idea of a haunted house. The book and the movies that followed created a powerful myth. They blended the facts of the DeFeo murders with the supernatural claims of the Lutzes. This blend made it difficult for people to separate the truth from the fiction. The house itself became a character, an evil entity. It became a tourist attraction, drawing curious visitors from all over. But what about the story that started it all? What happened to Ronald DeFeo Jr.? He spent the rest of his life in prison, always maintaining that he was not the only one responsible. He gave many interviews from behind bars, each one seeming to offer a new or slightly different version of the events of that night. His story continued to change, adding to the confusion and mystery. He was denied parole several times. For him, there would be no escape from the consequences of that terrible night. He remained a prisoner, not just of the state, but of his own dark past. Ronald DeFeo Jr. died in prison custody on March 12, 2021. He was 69 years old. His death marked the final chapter in a story that has haunted America for nearly half a century. But even with his death, questions remain. Did he act alone? What was his true motive? Was there any truth to the stories of voices, or was it all a desperate lie? We will likely never know for certain. The complete truth seems to have died with him, locked away forever. The only thing we know for sure is what happened on that awful November night. And that is the real tragedy of Amityville. It is not a story about ghosts or demons or a haunted house. It is a true story about a real family. It is about a father, a mother, and 4 children whose lives were cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. Their story has been buried under layers of myth and Hollywood horror. But at its heart, the case of Ronald DeFeo Jr. is a chilling reminder of the darkness that can exist, not in the supernatural world, but within the walls of a family home. And that is a truth far more frightening than any ghost story.